Hi everybody, I'm super excited to have Ken Wisnefski, CEO of WebiMax, joining us today. WebiMax is known for its dominance in the digital marketing space here in the US and internationally. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Ken, given how COVID has affected us on the national and the global scene, how do you feel it has affected business and how businesses operate today?
Sure, and it's a great question, and it's obvious something that is kind of on everybody's minds because all businesses had to deal with this. No business could really come back and say, hey, we were prepared for the pandemic that we faced. I'd say the biggest change that I've seen in businesses has really been not just the fact that online or digital was part of their business, it has really become a focal point of their business. With restaurants needing to really adjust how they're doing things and more going to online ordering and people eating takeout, businesses that for a long time considered themselves to be brick and mortar and really were resistant to any type of web-based scenarios now are forced into a scenario where they need to evolve and ultimately utilize that. So in some respects, it's been something that's been valuable for businesses to really adapt a lot of these things, and it's opened consumers to a lot of different opportunities to be able to have access to different food, to different services that before they might not have because they just weren't digitally enabled.
How many of these changes do you expect to continue into the future, to remain with us?
That, again, I think when you look at a lot of the changes that have happened, a lot of businesses were forced to have to do these and make these changes. They were things that were always on their kind of list to move forward with, but they weren't something that they were actually forced to have to do until this. So I think you're going to see a lot of things change. I mean, I think, things as simple as how menus before we're out on tables is going to change, and it's never going to go back to the way it was. The access that you have for online ordering and all of these different things is really going to be something that I think we're going to see big changes in addition to huge changes in just how the workforce is, right? I think those offices that had 1,000 people crowded into a small space, arm in arm next to each other, with the ability to work remotely and all the remote access that have really taken place, I think the environment's going to change a lot, and I think it's really changed business, not just for now, but forever.
Ken, given the way social media dominates our community, our world today, businesses, individuals, we can be followed in every aspect of our lives practically. What advice do you have to businesses and individuals on how they manage their identity online?
So the reality of it is people are Googled for everything now. If you're gonna go find a place to eat, you're gonna Google them, you're gonna read a review, you're gonna see something. You're gonna make a decision about whether or not you're gonna eat at this location based upon some reviews you see. You have a job candidate, you're gonna do a little bit of digging on that person to find out what's out there about them. Even, people in the dating world are gonna Google who they might go on a date with and see what's out there on them. So people don't think that what's being said about them online isn't important. They're sadly mistaken, because your online identity, your online brand, even as an individual, really has more significant weight than almost anything else about you right now because of the access of Google. Google started out as a search engine, and now it's actually a word that you talk about, oh, I Googled you, right? So what lives online about you really has tremendous impact on you as an individual and as a business. And reality is, people oftentimes don't think, well, nobody would Google me. But in reality, that's not the case.
Now, what advice do you give those individuals how to manage their identity? I mean, there's got to be some kind of balance about what to share and what not to share.
Absolutely. I think that when you look at kind of what's out there, simple Googling of yourself allows you to be able to find out what's being said about you. For your average, consumer, there might not be much out there. Setting up simple things like a Google alert, which is free and pretty simple to do, enables you to hear if there was something being said about you. I think the real challenge comes into play when businesses or individuals are seemingly leading their normal lives and they're suddenly thrust into a crisis type of situation, or there's an event that has some negative connotation around it. The ability to really be able to face that negative situation and that moment in time, and really be able to manage that is critical to your long-term success and really being able to have a strong online reputation. And a lot of businesses fail at that. And the reality of it is, those times are the most critical in really the survival as a business.
So to your point, news travels fast today. I mean, faster than it's ever in history. And businesses find themselves oftentimes in a situation of crisis. If you're a business in a crisis situation, what would you advise?
I mean, I think the biggest thing nowadays, and you're absolutely right, news travels so fast. In the past, a crisis situation could take months to kind of unfold. Now it can unfold in minutes. The reality of it is, in my opinion, is always when you're faced with these situations, honesty is usually always the best policy. It is always the best policy, because the reality of it is, if you're not upfront and you're not transparent, you're never going to be able to regain that trust of your customers down the line if something is revealed. So honesty is always the best policy, but at the same time, trying to get out in front of things and addressing them, not letting it build up and waiting before you issue some sort of apology. Really being out there in the forefront provides you the best opportunity to find one of these crisis situations and navigate it, which is difficult to do, but ultimately it's an old adage, but I think it really holds true today. Honesty being the best policy, and really doing so with a bit of urgency.
Ken, along the lines of things in the news, one of the big topics out there today is big tech and their influence on the news that people get to read. Most recently, the big to-do about Donald Trump and being banned from certain big platforms that we all know, and how that affects the public's rights to know this information, and whether they have the right, the big tech that is, has the right to pick and choose who they want to screen and who they don't want to. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, obviously, I think it goes to show just how powerful a lot of these platforms are, and just how much those messages are really carried out by those platforms. My belief is that anytime you have standards like this, they have to adhere to everyone. So if this is going to be the way they're going to handle things, if they feel that there's something that in some way is inciting violence or really promoting hatred, then that needs to be something that isn't really singled out around one individual, one person. Even if it is the President of the United States of America, it needs to be a scenario that is really pulled out across their platform broadly. So any information like that, anything that's doing that, would need to be something that they don't really allow, and they shut those accounts down. So my feeling is, if there's a general rule as a platform that that's not something they're going to accept, they need to do it across the board. If they're going to pick and choose who they censor and who they don't, I do have an issue with that, because that places a lot of control in there. All the different platforms have certain rules. If they adhere to those rules, people that want to use those platforms, they need to adhere to those rules to be able to utilize that platform. So there's give and take. It can't be a scenario where it's pick and choose and you're working with someone and giving somebody else some benefit when you're not the other. In my opinion, I feel that that's the best way to accomplish that. If they have hard, steadfast rules, those rules are in place for everyone, not just certain individuals.
Reputation management. WebiMax has built quite a following in the reputation management world. And can you give the audience a little bit idea of, how you approach that and what services you provide businesses and individuals that are in need of reputation management?
Sure. And reputation management really has a few different facets around it. First and foremost, sometimes we have companies come to us and say, hey, there was some sort of negative situation and we want it removed from our search results. In reality, we're not in the business of being able to alter or change history. That's something that's impossible to do. But the reality of it is, we can work in some cases to have content removed. In other cases, we can work to kind of suppress some of that content. And other aspects are by actually utilizing more positive or neutral content, we can help a scenario where we can kind of help these situations be less aggressive than they were before. Our belief has always been that, we're a company that has ethics. So we've actually passed on a lot of potential lucrative opportunities because there was information there that we felt shouldn't be suppressed. There's a lot of situations that come up when people are alleged in different scenarios of different aspects, and these damage them greatly. And, in some cases, I think we all know it nowadays that, a lot of people, feel that if it's on the internet, thus it's the truth. And I think we both know better than that. And, as I spoke about before, your profile and what comes up when you're Googled has immense value across so many parts of your life.
Ken, when it comes to marketing your business, your online identity, that sort of thing, for a long time, SEO was, the way to go. And there's this notion today that SEO is dead. What are your thoughts on that? How should people approach that?
Having been involved with organic search, SEO, kind of since its inception, there's been a real evolution in really how it works and how it really kind of impacts the search results. To Google's credit, they have really made it difficult to be able to quote unquote game the system. But in reality, if you look at the search results today, the large majority of the first page results are really paid results. They're results that really resonate from someone paying to be on that location. The fact or the notion that SEO is dead isn't necessarily true in any respect, but I think when you look at the investment that you would make for SEO and compare it to investment you would make for some paid placement, I think that both of those aspects had to be weighed, and you have to think, well, where is my investment better made to get visibility? My impression would be that it's always good to kind of diversify. While you're working towards getting better results through your organic search, you can augment that by also getting some paid results. SEO is not dead, but it is also not the driving factor that it once was. And that's just because the fact that Google recognizes that landscape on first page, right, that real estate that lives there is extremely valuable. And they've made, right, billions of dollars being able to monetize that real estate. And I don't see it getting to a point that there's more free listings. There's just going to be more paid listings.
You're a business out there, you're thinking about punching up your marketing campaign or creating a market campaign going forward. You mentioned balance it, sounds a little like the stock market. What would your recommendation be to them? Coming out of the gate, how would you handle that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think for a long time, I wasn't a believer in what social media could really do for businesses and driving business. I recognized its value to individuals for sharing information, but it wasn't really an aspect that I really viewed as something that was really tangible for businesses to utilize in their marketing, be able to grow. But over time, their ability to really be able to harness their targeting and their very specific demographic information that they can use has really made social media be one of the biggest drivers, I think, of opportunity for businesses. Obviously, Google continues to be one of those businesses that is really kind of at the forefront of any marketing campaign, and ultimately keeping in mind scenarios that we had kind of talked about, making sure that your search results about your company are also very visible. So I think nowadays, when you look at marketing, my feeling is that the investment in digital and across all those different avenues is going to be the smartest money that you're going to spend as a business in really utilizing that. Everybody uses their smartphones. Everybody's engaged and focused on their digital content all the time. Spending it on other things doesn't really drive that value. That's really where you want to focus.
Sounds like healthy advice. Being an entrepreneur and having launched and sold and grown businesses, what's your advice to young entrepreneurs today?
Oftentimes, younger businesses are focused on the business and the growth of the business and their idea, and they spend very little time really looking at the aspects that really gain the true value of the business. They spend too much money. They have no real detail of how much money they're spending. And they say, well, I have some money that I can use towards this business, and they find how quickly it's gone. The reality of it is utilizing a smart concept of really making sure you're tracking how much money is being spent, how much money is going out. And that's really what's going to be able to help you really build a real business. You hear about these companies that got these $100 million investments from venture capital, and they had the greatest idea in the world, and they've got all this money, and they're going to take over the universe. And then a year later, you hear they blew through all that money, and they're nowhere further to be found. Smart businesses do a better job of being able to do that. So my advice would be, you should follow your dreams. Now is an opportune time for businesses to really launch. But the reality of it is you have to be smart. You have to manage everything from the get-go. And I can tell you, you know how I know about that? I learned the hard way. I didn't always do it that way either. And I found how quickly money could spool and how quickly you could lose money and find yourself in a bad spot. So I think that it's always the right opinion if you have that desire and drive, but just make sure you're monitoring what you're doing, and expect that, it's not going to be a quick return.
Return on investment, right? I remember when I was in business school, they talked about John Wanamaker and how he said half of advertising is a waste. I just don't know what half.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's good advice.
How do folks know in digital advertising and digital marketing, how do they know that their money is well spent?
So years ago, when billboards and print magazines were the means of how people communicated, even television, there were metrics that showed how many people read it, how many people looked at it, and all those things were there. And over time, they began to look at it and say, well, that's not necessarily true. We can't tell how many people actually purchased that magazine because we don't know how many people actually looked at your ad. With digital, there's so much ability for tracking and analytics. You can track right down to certain clicks to determine what's converting to a sale, what's converting to a lead. It's eliminated a lot of these large branding campaigns that actually really have no value, and it's really tied things a lot deeper into true analytics, which can really show and drive your business. You can make educated decisions based on these analytics. And that's something that I think WebiMax is really adhered to, is when we look at campaigns, we don't just kind of talk about the results, we can actually show them through analytics. So it really vets out the ability for you to show what you're capable of doing. And it's not just like, well, hey, we think 1,000 people read this. No, we could show you how many people read this, and we could show you the return from that. So when you talk about Wanamaker's ROI conversion, he wasn't living in the world of analytics. Digital analytics, that is.
Well, John Wanamaker was a pretty brilliant man and built quite the empire, but I'm sure he would have enjoyed the benefit of WebiMax and your consult if you were here today.
Well, that's some high praise. I appreciate it.
I want to thank you so much for coming out and spending time with us today.
Thank you, I really appreciate it.
And if anybody has questions, they can reach out at webimax.com.
Absolutely, always the best place to find us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very
Appreciate
much, Mike. Thanks.